All right, guys, what are we talking about today? I'm not gonna lie, it's hard work. We're gonna talk about courage. It's hard work, but it's good for you. It's good for me. One of my favorite quotes. 99% hard work, 99% of the time it's gonna be a bitch. All right. Yeah, that's it, baby. You know, courage, it's hard work, baby, but it's good for us. I want to make these videos brief and inspirational, and more than anything, I want my energy to bless your energy, and just using the power of the internet, and however I could achieve that, and whether it's a song or perhaps it's a scripture. This is John 13:35. If you're a Jesus, and you could read that. But this is something about, I want to talk about courage. Maya Angelou says courage is the chief virtue because by which it makes all other virtues possible. If you think about that, like for example, if you want to be more loving, so often you have to be willing to be courageous or honest. And recently I was thinking that the hardest thing you could do, the hardest thing any person can do, is to live a life of intentional. To live a life of intention, and for me to say, John, I'm going to live a life where I'm intentionally honest. I'm going to live a life where I'm rigorously loving, and I'm going to live a life of courage. Now, that doesn't mean I'm always successful. In fact, there's been a lot of times that my honesty has wounded people, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of times people just want to be affirmed. People don't want to really be loved. People want to be affirmed. And our Facebook culture sort of perpetuates that. Our Facebook culture has created a world where people are saying, like me, like me, like me, affirm me, affirm me, affirm me. But you know what people really need? Or you know what I need? When I look back at my life, it was the lack of courage in my life. It was the lack of love in my life. And it was the lack of wisdom in my life. And so, though that was sort of the petri dish by which a lot of my heartbreak came. And so, how do we get out of that? How do we have good lives? How do we have happiness and courage and to have life and life abundantly? Well, there it is. It's one word: courage. It's one of my favorite quotes. And again, I think I've said before, one of the things I recommend to everybody is to have 5 quotes that they really live by. And to truly live by them. Like, for example, life shrinks or expands in proportions to one's courage by Anais Nin. And she just simply says, and she's a great writer, she goes, life will shrink or life will expand in proportion to one's courage. And the thing about the virtues and why I love virtues is because I struggle to have them, and they are hard work, but they're good for us. For example, I started a finance company, and I moved to Austin, Texas, and I, it was one of those kind of I don't want to say rags to riches, because, we only went up to $500,000, and here I am in San Francisco, and there's people who have boats that are 10 times what I made in a 10-year career, so it's all relative. But where I went from poverty to abundance, what I was really employing in my life for the first time? I was about 30 years old. Courage. Because if you would have lined up 10 MBAs and said, hey, if I were to give you my business plan, if I'm going to start an online mortgage company and I'm going to call it mylendingplace.com and just going to be me, I'm not going to go work for other banks, I'm going to be the bank, and that bank grew to have a correspondent line of $1 million, and I started with less than $100, even less than $10. And I'll tell you that story later. I ended up selling a house to fund the company, and then the house didn't appraise well, so I ended up, I was going to have seed money of $40,000. I ended up only making about $8,000 from the house, and I said, well, fuck it, I'm already pot committed, and marriage was already kind of on the rocks, and I experienced more financial freedom and more financial happiness from that act of courage and than anything. And so if I don't know where you are when you're watching this video. I don't know what you're going through. For me back then, and even now, finances come and finances go. But how do we live a life of intention? And what's the spiritual role to happiness? Well, in my opinion, it's learning to live a life of virtue. Living a life of virtue. And one of the virtues that I think is so underrated, and it's the hardest one to do, and it's the one of courage. And so wherever you're at, whatever you're going through, it could be with relationships, it can be with money, it could be with whatever. Is generally speaking, the hardest decision to make and the most courageous decision to make is the best decision to make. And so I even came up with a little slogan, and I said, because I was just constantly striking out, constantly making mistakes, and for me, I just kind of through prayer and meditation, this quote came up in my heart, and the quote was simply, "Faith fueled by desire through courage." And I decided then and there, whether I was perfect at it or not, that I was going to start making decisions from faith fueled by desire through courage. And where those three arrows pointed, that's where I was going to go. Faith fueled by desire through courage. In fact, let me kind of end on a relationship note. Let's see what's on the radio. It's probably the same song. Let's see, check it out. My only working remedy. Yeah. When I struggle to breathe, it's 'cause your hard work, relationships. How does courage? How can we be more courageous in relationships? Well, from experience, I met this girl one time, and really attracted. This is after my divorce, and it's hard dating after divorce. And anybody who's been divorced knows that it's difficult. But I met this girl once, and really attractive, and I didn't get her number, and I knew where she worked, and I'm like, man, should I call her? And of course, I didn't try to Facebook stalk her, and of course couldn't find her. And so I was like, man, what am I going to do? This girl's beautiful, and I like to talk to her, and I remember from my days in the 12 steps when I'd go to those meetings, and in the big book, the book for drunks, it says faith means courage. Faith means courage. And here I'm in this dog park, and I met this beautiful girl, and I'm thinking of the big book, and it's just simply said faith means courage. And I love that from the big book, because it says, John, faith at the end of the day means you're going to make courageous decisions. So what did I do? I called her work, left a message, and she called me back. We ended up dating for 3 months, and it was one of my best relationships ever, in so many ways. And, that relationship came out of courage. And, the financial success that I had in the past with mylendingplace.com, it came from courage. And so I don't know you, I don't know where you're at, but I do know that courage is the answer. In fact, there is no harder life to live than a life where we employ rigorous honesty, massive courage, and intentional love. And, no one's going to do that perfectly. We all have off days, but to practice the intentionality of love, courage, and honesty, man, that's where it's at. All right, guys, leave you with that quote. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. Remember, it's hard work, but it's good for us. You guys have a great day. I'd love to hear from you. Americano417@gmail.com. Email me, Americano417@gmail.com.